The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot, no longer restricted, by the way, Roger, currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline carrier with over 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 141 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, recorded on the 15th of December, 2023, from high atop the 10th floor of the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Crystal City, Virginia. On today's flight, we can see the end of 2023 on the horizon. Yeah, it's a curved horizon, folks. It's not a flat Earth. Another podcast, another show. We celebrate Season 5's final flight. Captain Roger, Alex D., Terry S., and Aviator Tony will discuss the required flexibility of private schedules versus airline schedules. We'll also talk about temporary duty assignments, the 750-hour mark at Sandpiper, and international wide-body flying over the holidays this season. So stay with us as we run our final checks, and we prepare to push off the gate. Flight 141 of the Squawk Ident Podcast is officially underway. Well, joining us today is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, Dassault Falcon 900EZ in 2000, and G650 commander. He's a captain and director of flight operations and corporate operator as well. He joins us after a hectic few weeks of flying into the unknown. From somewhere in San Diego, California, please help me in welcoming to the show our very own Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
Well, I got to tell you, Tony, I'm just glad. It sounds like both of us got promotions or upgrades from the last episode where I was not a real captain and you were restricted captain. So I'm just tickled right now that both of us have managed to upgrade.
Yeah, we're moving up in our career.
At least in your introduction.
Well, our career is very that. Every stepping stone that we take is always just a minor step, right? You start out with your private. And then you take that check ride and you have that certificate in your hand and you're like, oh, wow, someday I too am going to be a real pilot. All right, stop. Record scratch. No, you are a pilot. You have a license to drive. Congratulations. You're just now going to elevate to the next step. And that's what you do. You step it up to your private instrument. And then maybe your commercial single, commercial multi, and then commercial instrument multi. And then you just keep going, right? And eventually you get into like a career opportunity. And Roger, you felt this both at an airline environment and in the Part 91 environment. And every time you have one more aircraft, one more type rating, one more step, one more check ride, one more FAA medical pass, it's all these minor things that add up to a giant career. And the more
that's one thing I will say. That, there always is one more thing, but I guess from where I'm sitting, for you, and Rob and Terry to a certain degree, you have much less of those now. Like, you've made it. Captain Tony has made it. I'm sure that you're not going to retire on the Airbus 320 series.
Probably not.
But you're a legacy airline captain. And, that's pretty much it. There's not really anywhere to go from there. Terry has made it, even albeit in the right seat, but the path is out there for him. It's laid out. I think he's even off probation now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's much harder for him to get in trouble. And same thing with Rob, obviously sitting in the left seat of the legacy as well. And that is something that I do think about. Something like it does seem like there's more for me. There's more pitfalls, I guess. in doing what I do. And there's lots that go into that have actually come up within the last month that I can't talk about a lot of it. But, in the Part 91 world, it's all very fickle because you're dependent on one person or one corporation,
one owner,
and you never really know what's going to happen next because there is always another job. Like, when was the last time you guys updated your logbooks?
I got to admit, every leg and paper as well.
You're nuts. Alex, you don't count. Why?
Every trip. I do my digital ones every
Alex,
trip.
you don't count because you are going to need to submit your logbook for that logbook review. That's just reality.
Okay. No, okay, I'll agree, but still.
Where for these guys, maybe the electronic versions, but I need to I apparently stuck my foot in my mouth because I asked a question that I obviously did not know the answer to.
Electronic logbook. It updates from the cloud every leg. It pulls data from Cerium. And
so you don't actually have to do anything.
All I have to do is hit autofill now.
Oh, wow.
Technology.
Wow. And Terry is our home tech guy. So if there's any kind of question about, the best way to do things or an app for that, Terry's the guy to talk to. But yeah, Roger.
So I had to eat my words there, but my point still is that you guys don't need to. There will be no more interviews for you guys versus for me. I know that there will be.
Well, yes and no, because I mean, let's look at Captain Keith, who we had on the show a couple shows ago. I'm happy to report he is flying. He is flying. I think it was a Citation jet around. He did find employment and even post-retirement. Now, granted, once you get up there and you can just go, well, here's a printout from my employer showing that just at my employer, I have 32,000 hours of flight time. Who cares? Who cares what your little private pilot, student pilot logbook said back in whenever you started, right? A couple decades back. Who cares? Because you've clearly have multiple type ratings. You're a wide body captain in retirement. Fine. But yeah, you're right. Alex is our guy who is in the process and his journey. And we love hearing about how he's progressing, and he will need to keep something up, whether that's an electronic form, whether that's a paper logbook or what have you. He's going to have to present that. And I remember one, interview question that I'm so proud that I answered this way. It was many, many years ago, 20 years ago. And I was being interviewed for Sandpiper, and during my logbook review, the captain that was conducting that portion of the interview asked me, "Is your logbook accurate and truthful?" And without missing a beat, I looked him right in the eye and I went, "Sir, my logbook is as accurate and truthful to the best of my ability and knowledge." And he smiled and he goes, "Good answer," So yeah, that's a whole other topic, logbook accuracy. It's a legal document. That's why it's on green paper, so you can't photocopy it or white it out.
No, it's not the JEP ones anymore. JEP ones have switched to white. That big book.
It's not green anymore?
No, it's all white.
That's bonkers.
Mine's white.
Yours is white?
That's the one that I've had since Tailwind.
Oh,
since I don't build flight time nearly as quickly as you guys do.
I'm on my third Jeppesen Pro green paper.
No,
book.
if you order a new one, they are going to come white.
That's racist.
Hey, apparently Jeppesen ran out of green paper. That's the rumor.
Well, maybe or maybe it's cheaper. Yeah, whatever.
Probably.
But let us continue.
You can actually white it out.
Yeah, right. Well, let us continue with our introductions here before we start going off on more tangents. Also joining us today is another outstanding aviator and Squawk Ident Podcast co-host. He is a former U.S. Navy Reserve's Chief Information Systems Technician, a certified flight instructor, and an Embraer 175 pilot and pilot recruiter for Sandpiper Regional, the alias to one of Legacy Airlines' wholly owned regional airlines. Joining us from his home podcast studio, where he is getting ready for a 2-day trip into the holiday blizzards up ahead. I hope you're avoiding Miami and New York. I'm just saying. From his newly remodeled studio from somewhere in Justin, Texas, please help us in welcoming to our show, Mr. Alex D. Alex, how you doing?
Good. I'm hanging in there. Glad to record an episode. It feels like it's been forever since the last one.
Well, it has.
I remember the last one that we did. I was sitting on the floor right over there. Now I'm sitting at my desk.
Yeah.
Recording.
I can see your shelves in the background there with all of your accolades and accomplishments and some memorabilia from the family's history in aviation. I remember the first time you gave me a tour of your parents' home and all the wonderful historic photos on the wall. I can see you have, is that grandpa you have back there? On the top shelf?
Where? Top shelf, that's my wife's grandfather. That's him and his flag and Air Force hat. But the picture is of him in his Army Air Corps uniform where he was a B-17 pilot.
Mm-hmm. You have some big shoes to fill, my friend. Big shoes.
Well, I got that plus my grandfather's plane. You can't see it. It's a picture on the floor, the Corsair back there, plus my uncle's flight helmet. And then, well, we all know my father. So yeah, I'd say I have some big shoes to fill. It's aviation lineage.
Yeah. And I'm very happy that you now have a space to proudly display all them. And we look forward to, for those watching on the videos, which I'm sorry, it's been quite some time since I've posted a single YouTube video. But when these finally go up on YouTube, you'll be able to see Alex's background. Eventually, someday, you never know. I'm be sitting here on reserve in the hotel maybe the rest of the month. So let's find out. Hopefully, I'll have some opportunity to get those edited and posted soon too. But Alex, thank you for joining us today.
I do have one piece of memorabilia from the Squawk Ident.
Look at that. So Alex is holding up a square photo. It's the album cover art from the episode that we recorded with his father, where he was gracious enough to basically give us the detail of his journey in aviation and how times have changed. And my favorite quote came from that episode. And your father said to us, "Seniority is not everything. It's the only thing." And just blew me away. Just blew me away. And in this industry and in this, especially the airline career industry, definitely very wise words. So thank you, Alex, for sharing that with us. Also joining us today is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident Podcast co-host. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel and former Black Hawk Battalion commander. His journey has led him to operate Apaches, Black Hawk, C-12s, UC-35s. He has a master's degree in management and strategic studies, and he's a former Embraer 145 and Boeing 737 pilot. Currently, 7576 pilot for TransGlobal. The name we use here on the show is an alias to his employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Joining us from where he is allegedly watching his sick children, not flying much while on reserve. From his home podcast studios from somewhere in Northern Virginia, help us in welcoming our very own Terry S. Terry, how you doing?
Doing all right. Just hanging out at home. I'm on my last day off of a stretch of 2 days. And then I go back on reserve tomorrow. I got a phone call a little while ago that I did not answer because I'm not required to yet from crew scheduling, assigning me short call for tomorrow. So I'll call them back when I'm contractually obligated to do so. Until then, I will ignore it.
Wise words from a very wise man. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? I will not answer the phone or call them back until I am contractually obligated to do so. I can't tell you how important those words are when you're starting a career in an airline. Everyone is so gung-ho about learning their FOM or flight operations manual, right? The procedures that your company goes through. And then the next thing you're going to learn in long-term training is to get your type rating is systems and the operation of your aircraft and the type rating and passing your check rides and your stage checks and all that stuff. And then you get on the line, you do IOE and you get out there and now they release you to IOE and now you're on reserve and now you're trying to learn how to bid and you're trying to learn how to get flying and how many hours do I need to get in so many days for my consolidation and all this stuff. And we all do the same thing. And that's unless we come from a long line of aviators, we don't realize how important it is to know the contract and learn the contract. And most airlines have a union website that will handle spreadsheets and flow charts and all these things to learn the bare bones minimum basics so that you know when to you're obligated to do things. And it's important to do so because if the scheduling department, say, calls you while you're at rest and they assign you a trip, and then you go, okay, I'll do it because, hey, you want to fly. That's why we're here. And then what you don't realize is you've allowed them to break their contract, their rest requirements, and now technically you are supposed to have, say, 10 hours of rest from the moment they contacted you, but now you're flying something that is outside of that. So now you're breaking the contract and you've set a precedence, and then that allows them to do it to the next person and the next person and the next person. And then all of a sudden the union goes, what are you guys doing? And now you have a kind of a mark, from your union reps, like, hey, did you see what Terry did? So very happy to hear that you will call them back when you're contractually obligated to do so. Very good job, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta follow the rules. They don't. The company they're not likely to do anything for you that's going to benefit you and cost them, unless they are contractually obligated to do so. So, it's you play the game, you do what you are supposed to do, what you're obligated to do, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's important to learn. You're not going to learn it overnight, but it's important to ask the questions. How often, one of my frustrations, and I would say lately, has been these Facebook pages. Yes, I dare said Facebook. You think, oh, he must be old. Well, yeah, I am. But a lot of airline groups will start a group on Facebook, like Los Angeles flight attendants on reserve page, or New York pilots for Delta Airlines page, or some of the airlines have below the line, meaning first officers only page. So you join these pages so that you can kind of get a scoop on what's going on. And, hey, did you hear this? Or someone might pose a question like, hey, the scheduling just called me and they gave me a triple deadhead to get to my layover, and they said I was legal for it because a deadhead doesn't count. Is this true? And people will comment, well, I beware anyone that relies on those comments, because look it up, call a rep, get it right from the horse's mouth, because a lot of those comments are intentionally sarcastic and false. I don't like those pages, although I do follow them because I too want to have a general understanding of what everyone's thinking and what direction the group is going in. So beware of those Facebook pages. And I'm really happy when I hear from a pilot that I'm flying with that, oh, actually, I'm not on Facebook or social media or anything. And I go, good on you. Yeah. So knowing the contract means getting the information in parts and pieces as the scenarios happen to you. Go directly to the union rep. That's what they're there for. You're paying dues every month out of your paycheck, right? If you're an airline pilot, you're paying dues every month. What do you think that money is for? It's not just for when you get in trouble for legal representation. It's to answer your questions. I call that 800 number quite often and go, hey, is this legal? What are my options here? And then what the nice part about that is they'll tell you, and then they'll tell you where in the contract to find it. Because at the end of the day, that's really the best way to become self-sufficient. Where can I find the information? And I guarantee you it's not on Facebook. Well, Roger, on the beginning of the introduction, you were telling us in the pre-show a little bit about what you've been going through and how you've been hectically flying around. Can you tell us how your flying recently has been pretty fluid? I mean, is this normal for a Part 91 operation to just get the call and be like, I need you here now?
That's a loaded question that depends on where you're at. It has been a little bit different from for me with over the past couple weeks or so, and it will be a little bit going forward. Because what we do in our operation and in a lot of Part 91, it's more of an on-demand thing because you fly for an entity, whether that's a private owner, whether that's a corporation. Um, and I can't get into details, nor do I want to, but the people that, for me personally, um, we fly for individuals, and those individuals are people too. And those people have problems just like the rest of us do. And unfortunately, in this particular case, it was a last minute phone call because something had happened in their personal lives that required immediate action. And in this case, required immediate action without really a final solution on exactly what the trip was going to look like. And so I left at the last minute and blasted off, um, 3,000 miles away, and wasn't really sure when I was coming back.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that does happen. It does not happen very often, but it did. And given the circumstances, we did what we needed to do for the principal.
Yeah.
And that's about kind of what it turned out to be. And it did come at a personal sacrifice because it not only was it a last minute, it actually was a little bit odd, what the original plan was. I thought the original plan was going to be, it turned out to be much longer than that. And so um I ended up having to fly commercially to go get the airplane, to then fly it back empty to get a pickup, and kind of worked out to my advantage that we did because I did not pack enough clothes. And then I had an extra hour after fortunately, because I live only about 3 miles from the airport, I ran back home in the hour that I had before the passengers showed up, and I had to I grabbed an additional 5 days of clothes because I'd only packed 3.
Yeah.
So that kind of worked out to my advantage. And then we left, and we ended up being gone for 6 days total before coming back. But again, from that personal costs,
Yeah.
they were long days. We airlined, and then we flew an airplane empty, and then we flew, it wasn't quite 3,000 miles, but 2,500 miles. And so we did all that in one day. And then when we came back, we actually had a round trip, very short, and then flew the 2,500 miles back. And so you're talking 17 and 18-hour days of um, of being awake, being quote unquote on duty. I mean, you guys have 5-hour sits sometimes, and that's kind of what it was. We fly, and then we had 6 hours. It turned out to be 6 hours in between, but then flying the long leg back. But it's just one of those things that we had to do. These people, they are people too, and things happen in their personal lives just like the rest of us. And this was just one of those times that required immediate action on our part without necessarily knowing everything, and we did. Even though it does come at a little bit of a sacrifice, and we don't have a union that says, "Hey, I'm not obligated to do that."
Right. And that, I think that's probably, we've, over the years that we've talked about this on the show, we've talked about the differences between, say, a Part 35 or 135 or a Part 91 operation versus a scheduled airline where, we've talked about differences from doing your own flight planning, your own fueling requirements, filing transportation visas, and paying for things like landing fees and making sure that rental cars are taken care of, versus I just show up an hour prior to the trip, I push a couple buttons on my tablet, download the flight plan, the weather, and if I have to send a message to dispatch, I can just text it to them from inside the cockpit of the aircraft, and everything's pretty much taken care of because it's a much larger operation with many more departments in charge to keep that giant engine turning, versus an operation where you have only a few aircraft and you're, completely private entity. So you're doing a lot more, but we never really talked about how you don't have that union representation when you're at a private entity or a Part 135. You don't have a contract that says, don't answer your phone. So there's a lot more required of you. And I know we've talked about this in the past that a lot of times airline pilots will go their entire career and think, well, I want to keep flying. After I retire, I'll just go fly corporate. And then they're shocked when the corporate operators go, well, we don't really like hiring you guys because you expect everything to be spoon-fed. Flying, as you've mentioned many times before, is the highlight, the very small percentage of what you do. It's by the time you're flying, the work is done. You've done it all. And so that's something to consider, especially if you're a young aviator in today's market and you're thinking, well, I'll just go fly corporate and I'd rather do that. Well, that's fine. But this is kind of a good way to kind of get an idea of what you're getting into. You're going to do a lot more than fly.
You are going to do a lot more. I mean, all those things that you mentioned at the beginning of that, all those things that had to be done, all those things still needed to get done, except they had to get done within the span of a couple hours. There was an international component to some of this. So there is EAPIS filing. Do you need a visa? In our case, fortunately, it wasn't that. We didn't need to deal with that. But there's the customs aspect, both in the United States. There's the customs aspect in the other place. And okay, what are we going to do for our transportation? How long do we need transportation? Where are we going to stay? The transportation for the passengers. Do we need all of that stuff? Still needs to happen, except it now needs to happen like right now, before we then get in the airplane and have those responsibilities that you guys singularly have just to kind of show up.
Right.
And you fly those flights, it's like, okay, did we get everything? And sometimes the answer is no. I mean, obviously you have to prioritize what needs to get done. A rental car is not something that's necessarily priority. A rental car, we ended up with one, but we didn't leave with one. I'll just use as an example. It's like, okay, now that we know that we're going to be here for a little bit longer, all right, now let's look at that and what is that going to look like? Then we get a hotel. We ended, well, let's get the hotel for extra amount of time, and then we can always check out early. It's stuff like that. It's a very fluid, it's very flexible, and you have to be able to work with that. And you also need to be able to self-advocate for yourself, because you don't have a union. There are some times, which I have also had in my career, that there's a request for, I want to do this. And yeah, that doesn't we can't do that. Or I really can't do that because of, I've got this going on in my life, and me giving up this so that you can do that. That's, you have to self-advocate, and you kind of got to feel that out and hopefully know with the kind of operator that you're dealing with. Some you can do that, some you can't. And then there are times like the one that that I personally just had the last couple of weeks. It was, what do you need? And we'll get it done.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to kind of feel that stuff out. And in the end, it's, not every individual is going to be the right fit for every operation. You need to have the right person with the right operation, and that person that might be right for one operation might not be right for another, but that same person that is right for one is not for another. And you have to be able to be flexible, find the position that's right for you and that you fit into, and that they fit with you also. Because everything is different. It's not as cookie cutter as, whether you're at United or American or Delta, they're going to look pretty similar. They're going to debate the finer points of their contracts, sure, and there are differences, but it's pretty much the same. And it is definitely not like that in the Part 91/Part 135 world. Each operator is going to be very different.
Right. And really, that's the kind of catch-22, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is because when you go to an airline, it really doesn't matter. Sure, there are some nuances that are different, but they're all pretty much going to operate very similarly under the nuances and the guise of what the FAA would require for your typical airline operation. But when you get into Part 135 or Part 91, really, there's so much more variance there between who you fly for, who's your boss, what region are they flying in, all these things. And so you may have a kind of a bad experience at one operator. It doesn't mean they all operate that way, so you kind of have to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to the private flying, I think, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you got to be flexible. You have to first you have to find the operation that fits right with you and your goals and your personality. And then once you get into that, you hopefully will know getting into it, hopefully, how much flexibility there will be in that. I mean, you could end up with a Part 135 that operates on something like a 15 on, 8 off or something, in which case if you're 15 on, you better be flexible because that is your job.
Right.
If you are on your on section, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. If they want to go mountain biking at midnight, you're going to go and fly them to their mountain biking at midnight. You can't say no. Versus like what I do in a lot of 91 operations. Okay, well, I literally was up all day and then I just got my kid who's sick to bed and I haven't slept and now you want me to go fly that's not going to happen.
Right.
And that's that self-advocating, but it depends on the operation that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you'll get to know, if you are doing the Part 91, you'll get to know the owner or the executives and kind of what their operation is like and what their expectations are. And then you kind of need to operate within the framework of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for explaining that. That really does, I think, clarify a couple things for those that are kind of deciding, maybe they're working on their commercial or their instrument rating now and they're thinking, well, I don't know if I want to go airline side or corporate side. It does give you a little bit of better representation of what you're dealing with on both sides there. Now, we've talked about the flexibility of schedules, and I know I've mentioned in the last show that I was going to be TD wide, temporary duty assignment, temporary duty, TDY, to DCA. Now, for legacy airlines, when you're based in DCA, you are responsible for 3 airports. That's Washington Dulles, IAD, Washington Reagan, which is DCA, and then Baltimore, Maryland, which is BWI. So I could get a phone call from scheduling and say, I need you to fly out of Baltimore tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're doing a 3-day trip, and I would be responsible for it. Now, why? I know some of you are thinking, Tony, you're a LA-based Airbus captain. Why are you in DCA? Did you volunteer for this? No. Now, there are provisions that you can volunteer for a temporary duty assignment. Why would you want to do that? Maybe you want to go check out flying in the East Coast for a month in the wintertime and be able to see museums, make a little mini vacation out of your days off. So you can volunteer for it. Or if they don't get people to volunteer for it, because they do post it, like, hey, we need 3 captains from LA on the Airbus to go to DCA next month. If nobody volunteers, then they have to do what's called an involuntary TDY. And I was unfortunately selected for that. Now, yeah, I kind of roll with the punches. Was it an inopportune time in my life personally? Yes. Is it during the holiday season when I'd rather have days off at home, spend with my family? Absolutely. But it is what it is. And at least over at Legacy, when you get involuntarily TDY'd, then they put a little check mark on that box and you don't get involuntary TDY'd again, usually for about a year. So, and I know that somebody can probably correct me on the contract. There might be some provision in there that explains that. But yeah, I got nabbed for it. So starting December 1st, I was based in Washington, D.C. And so when the bidding process happened in November, I didn't bid in LA, I bid Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, my seniority could not hold a line. I did hold long haul reserve, which is 12 hours, I think, between when they call you and what your show time is. So that gives you plenty of time. Now, could I be spending time at home and wait for them to call me? Yeah. It's a 6-hour flight out of LAX, and they don't have one every hour. They only have like 2 or 3 a day. So it would not be wise for me to do that. Now, if I was TDY'd in Phoenix, then yeah, I could be home right now, even though I'm on call, because then when they call me, I can just run over to the airport and I could even go out of Ontario, hop on another carrier like Frontier or Southwest, someone that does direct. And I could, within an hour or two, I could be at my local airport, and within 3 hours, I can be in base and ready to go. But because it's a transcontinental position, I have to be here. So they gave me a hotel. And I got to choose whether I wanted the downtown kind of long layover hotel, which is in Georgetown, or the short layover hotel, which is in Crystal City, which is literally across the causeway or the parkway to the airport. And I chose the short hotel because there's everything I need here. I have malls and restaurants, and I have the Mount Vernon Trail, which I can go for a run. And it's a beautiful day. I don't know if this video will make it to the YouTube, but looking over my shoulder, it's just a gorgeous day. The hotel's nice. So here I am. This is my second stint. I was here at the beginning of the month. I did get used for a 2-day trip. I believe I posted a few things about that on social media. That was tough. They gave me a trip on my last day, my last 2 days, and my trip ended pretty much in the afternoon, but my car was in LAX, so I had to wait for that flight. Now, I could have hopped on a flight that got me to Dallas or Phoenix or Charlotte, and then from there, hop on a second leg, deadhead back home to spend 4 days at home, which would have landed at LAX only about 45 minutes before the direct flight. And those flights were all overbooked, oversold, and I didn't want to risk sitting in a cockpit jump seat for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. So instead, I took a position on the direct flight. When I showed up at the gate an hour prior and I went to go check in, I checked in as a D2. I won't get into the specifics on why or what that means. All you need to know is it's a commuting pass, kind of lower in the priority, not a positive space ticket. And I said, yeah, I just want to check in for the flight. And the gate agent goes, okay. And she was looking at my badge and typing in the computer 100 miles an hour. And her supervisor behind her goes, she turns around and goes, well, that wasn't very nice. He's like, this is a weight restricted aircraft. You know, it's raining outside. And I went, yeah, I know. Is the cockpit jump seat weight restricted too? Worst case scenario. And he's like, it's weight restricted. That doesn't count. It's part of the weight restriction. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. So the captain comes up and he sees me there in uniform and he goes, hey, you trying to catch a ride home? I'm like, yes, sir. And he's like, well, it's weight restricted, but we'll see what we can do for you. And I said, thank you. I appreciate that. So I stood aside out of the way and I'm start looking at the flight plan and everything. Yeah, they put 2,000 pounds of ferry fuel on there. And I'm thinking, who's this dispatcher? Come on, man. It says right there on the header, weight restriction. So I'm thinking to myself, the captain's going to figure this out, you know. So I just stayed quiet. And about 10 minutes later, the captain came up to the gate agent and said, hey, I called the dispatcher. We took care of the weight restriction issue. You're no longer weight restricted. Fill it up. Every seat. And she was like, oh, thank you, Captain. I'm like, see? He gives me a thumbs up. I'm like, all right, great. So I got a seat on that, was it a 9 o'clock departure out of DCA. It was an A321neo, pretty big airplane. The wet weather and low visibility that was all the way from Miami all the way up the eastern seaboard was hitting DCA at the time. So wet numbers, maximum performance takeoff. We push off the gate, and personally, I got a seat. I didn't care. I was going home. I was going to be home. I had plans. I had family issues that I had to take care of and friends coming to stay with me. And so I was just happy to get home. But I got the seat right in front of the exit row. Does not recline on a newly remodeled A321neo with plastic seats and not very comfortable. And as soon as we took off, the guy's seat in front of me, I was at a window, not an aisle, which I prefer the aisle. He came back, not like Terry just did nice and, so he came back, chunk. If I was leaning forward just another inch or two, I would have had a welt in my head. So for the whole flight, I really was frozen in a upright vertical seated position with a seat 3 inches from my face, my field of vision. Of course, I was breathing on the guy's hair, like thinking maybe he'll like feel my breath on his hair and maybe put his seat up a little bit. No, it didn't work. So
Almost rather have the cockpit jump seat at that point.
well,
huh?
yeah, that would have been better, but at the time I didn't know I was in that particular seat and we were already boarding and what am I going to do? Captain, it sucks back here. So we push off the gate and of course we go line up and we're too heavy to take off on the runway in use. So we sat there for 20 minutes burning fuel. Then the captain made a PA saying, well, ladies and gentlemen, ATC is saying that we're not able to take off on this runway. It's going to be a long time with all the arrivals. So we're going to go and burn a little bit more fuel off and take off on the other runway because now we're light enough we can do it. Okay. So we finally took off late, landed at LAX a good 6 hours later, and I was not in good shape. And then I had to get on the van that took me to the parking lot, find my car in that giant lot, the employee lot at LAX, and then drive an hour and 30 minutes home in the evening traffic. So, yeah, that is some of the things we have to deal with doing this job is you have to, if you're a commuter, be kind to your commuters. Don't just be like, sorry, oh well, take the next one. Be kind. Do what you can. Give them a cookie now and again. It really does help. Get some sugar. But yeah, that was my experience so far on TDY. I got in last night after 4 days at home. I was able to handle, all the honeydew things that you have to deal with when you're at home. And then now, of course, I land here last night, and the car's busted and this and that, and it's like, all right. So now I'm on the phone all morning trying to deal with it. This is what we deal with. Schedule flexibility is definitely something you have to learn. When you're starting out as a private pilot and you're, just gung-ho to be an airline pilot, all you can think about is flying the big birds and making that beautiful landing with a 160,000-pound airplane. Well, that's great, but there's so much more that you have to sacrifice in order to do these things. And you just need to be prepared and have the mindset with a good mentality and a good positive attitude to get through it all. Otherwise, you're going to end up taking a crash axe to a parking gate in the middle of Denver International Airport because you've had enough. Have you gentlemen, Terry and Alex, have you guys felt this commuting or having to deal with deadheading and things like that?
Live in base. Live in
Agreed.
base.
Agreed. I did it for the last year, which is part of the reason why we moved out here. And generally, when I'm doing interviews and people ask about commuting and all that stuff, and one of the things I always caveat is that it's really what you make of it when it comes to commuting, right? Like some people do it, they love it. Some people do it and they hate it. But the piece of advice that I always give is live in base, because once you do, it changes the game for the airline. 100,000,000%, it changes it. Like it becomes like you're working for a brand new airline at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I was at ExpressJet, I commuted halfway across the country to go sit reserve in Houston, and that was miserable. I mean, yeah, you fly halfway across the country. Number one, you got to fight to get to work, right?
Yep.
And then when you get there, you go sit in a crash pad where you may or may not get used. And then when you don't get used, you hop back, you got to fight to go home.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is, you may be on for 4 days of reserve, but you're commuting in the day before and commuting out the day after. So you're on for 6 days. You get, you may only have 2 days off between reserve blocks. So you get home long enough to do laundry and repack your bag and you're out the door again. So
Yep.
it's if you can avoid commuting, I would highly recommend you avoid commuting. Now, as part of airline operations, you get deadheaded around quite a bit. I've had multiple trips end with deadheads. I had one just a couple weeks ago, deadheading out of Chicago, and then a week before that, deadheading out of Boston, and that's usually not as big of an issue because the airline has to get you home, right? Your positive space. But as far as commuting goes, that's no fun. And even like when I was going through training out in Denver, if I had more than a day off, the company would let me go home. But then you're trying to find flights, and you're fighting that whole thing again. And there were a couple weekends where it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the fight. You finish sim late, start sim early on the day you get back, and it's just not worth it. So living in base, like I live 25 minutes from Dulles, and I can be I like I said, I can be in the parking lot in 25 minutes. And then so if I'm on short call, like I am supposed to be tomorrow, maybe we'll see if that holds true. But if I'm on short call, that's great. We have a 2.5 hour call out. I mean, I can be sitting on my computer, messing around, not showered or shaved or anything, and still be at the airport in plenty of time to make any sort of call out they give me. And they're usually pretty good. They usually give you as much time as much notice as they can, whether that's 3 or 4 hours, or I've not gotten a right at 2.5 hour call out yet. So, but if I did, it's not a big deal. Live in base. And then, when you're a line holder, then you can pick up trips, right?
Yep.
You can grab premium trips. It makes life so much better living in base.
Yep.
Yeah, it really does. And we've talked about the quality of life issue. And before the show, we were talking about how, I was not a restricted captain anymore, and I've done my time, and actually did a Cat 3 Autoland for an FCC check. So what happens is after 90 days, the aircraft itself has to do a Cat 3 Autoland in order to maintain its currency. Not just the pilots have to maintain currency, but whenever you're doing the low visibility landings, the autopilot landings, the aircraft itself has to satisfy a regular cycle, and that has to be logged in the maintenance logbook and documented. And the aircraft I was flying, actually it was one of my first legs after I was no longer a restricted captain. The aircraft I was flying required a functional check of the Cat 3 Autoland. And so I did it. It was great. We'll be right back right after a brief message from our sponsors. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back real quick. I got a phone call during the podcast from my chief pilot in Los Angeles, one of them. And over at Legacy, I am, for those that don't know the listenership, I recently became a Cadet Academy mentor. I have what we call a pod of students. These are people that have been allowed into the program for the Legacy Airlines Cadet Academy, and they are currently in flight school. And they range from private pilot all the way through commercial multi. Alex.
Is this the actual Legacy Airlines Cadet Academy?
Yes.
Like the ones who are guaranteed an interview at one of the wholly owns of Legacy Airlines?
You are correct.
Okay, I'll talk offline about this, but we have our differences in recruiting about these people.
Okay. Well, this is my first experience, and I know Kyle, one of our guest hosts that comes on the show periodically. Kyle is and has been from the onset of his career at Legacy Airlines a mentor, so he's had countless mentees over the years, both in and out of the program, and that's one of the reasons that Kyle's not here more often, is that his schedule is just so riddled with mentorship programs, mentoring, and he's been doing this for 6 years now. and he's really a pro. And I've been going to Kyle a little bit about, what should I do with this and that. And so we're really trying to get people to be dedicated to come to Legacy Airlines through one of the wholly owns. And we're trying to get them from like the zero to hero, because that is really a major problem in this country is in the United States, finding young people that are interested in aviation and are willing to do the financial sacrifice required to get all your ratings. It's kind of hard because people are like, wait a minute, this is expensive. And then how much am I going to make? Well, the tides have turned over the years, past couple of years with the increase in year one pay at the regionals. So they have attracted more and more people. But the program is designed so that you have a mentor to help you out. Hey, I busted a check ride, or hey, I'm having a hard time with this oral, or hey, I'm losing concentration and focus, or I got too much going on in my life, or this financial aid is killing me. And so who do you ask? Well, in the past, if you're like myself or Roger or even Terry, you would ask your friends or family that are in the industry. And if you didn't have any, who do you ask? You ask your instructor. Your instructor is what, 6 months ahead of you in most cases? What do they know? They don't know very much. So these programs are really designed so that you have someone with the actual experience and knowledge, current experience and knowledge, to be able to guide you, to help you out, to give you that support, to give you pointers on how to overcome certain obstacles that you may be having in your training. And that's what the phone call I took during the show. So I do apologize. We may have skipped around in the topics, but let's talk a little bit about what we were discussing both before this podcast and on the phone is this age gap. Now you have issues with cell phone and electronic device usage. This has been ongoing. We've talked about this before. We had an entire show dedicated to it a few episodes back. And it's become an issue not just with flight operations, it's also becoming an issue out there on the flight line in training. Can you imagine you're in the middle of an oral and your instructor is knee deep in with their nose in their phone? And you're like sitting there, what do you do? How do you respond to this? Are they paying attention? Am I just sitting up here babbling? And they go, oh, that's not quite right. Say that again. Because they're really only listening for these key words, this rote memorization. Now, Roger, you were an instructor for a very long time. This was not ever an issue with you because your professionalism is above bar. But have you ever had an issue where maybe your student was on the phone while you're trying to give them instruction?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that kind of blew my mind a little bit. As an instructor, I can't imagine, like, that's your job. That's your profession. Stay off your phone. Now, I guess the only slight times that I was in the sim, there were times that I would do some texting, but never just surfing around, and that's why they're flying around. But students, I had students all the time that would be on their phones. It's long, it's dry, and it's such a pervasive part of our culture now. And I am not immune to that. I mean, why is it now that for whatever reason, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I need to do is go look at my phone?
You said the word need.
And even as I talk now, I'm not even sure who's listening to. Terry. Yeah. So Terry's down there. He's just on his phone. Alex down there on his phone.
Sorry.
What?
Sorry.
What?
Did you say something, Roger?
Oh yeah, I like Hawaii. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
It's such a pervasive part of our culture. And I don't know. It's only going to get worse. I don't know what the fix is. You guys have probably seen it on the flight deck. People on their phones during inopportune, not the smartest times.
Yeah, during sterile. Yeah.
It is definitely unfortunate when as an instructor that doing an oral section where you need to kind of be listening to. I mean, that's the whole point. You got to be listening to what they're saying so you can correct the things that are not correct as they're happening, instead of letting them go and then go, well, I'm waiting for you to use the word P factor.
Right.
Or whatever it might happen to be.
It's only half listening.
Huh?
Exactly.
Can you say that again?
It's only half. It's only half listening, because you're
What?
just, and you mentioned this, and it sparked a memory. Here I was. It wasn't a check ride, okay, but it was it wasn't a maneuvers validation. But I was in the simulator, and we're doing this. I think it was loft actually, and so we're in the middle of a loft scenario. I'm the captain. I have my FO, and I turned around because I was like, what's going on? Like, is this supposed to be happening? I forgot the scenario exactly, but something wasn't happening in the simulator. I'm like, what's going on? So I just fly the airplane. So we talked about this. This could happen. And I turned around to see what my instructor was doing, and he was on Pinterest.
Okay. So I just admitted that
At Legacy Airlines
in the simulator, I have had instructors in the sim fall asleep on me.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay.
The ones that have been on their phone, that does not bother me quite as much. The job of the simulator instructor, you have to, try and put yourselves in their shoes for just a second. They go on with nothing but these alarm bells that go off because engines fall off, because that's what happens in the simulator. And then they need to wait for you guys to run umpteen thousand checklists. So they were vectoring you around before they come in and shoot the approach into whatever it is that you guys have in your guidelines,
right?
For you to shoot that approach for the 19,000th time this month. Cut them a little slack. But when someone's talking to you, make sure that you're listening and you're not on your phone.
I'm sorry, what?
That's all I have to say about that as a former simulator instructor.
I'm sorry. We're talking about...
We're saying something?
About phones? Yeah, I just ordered my Grubhub. What? Actually, I just signed some very important documents, Roger.
For real?
For real. I just finished the last one. Yeah. Well, Terry, have you experienced this malaise of instruction and nonchalant tomfoolery on electronic devices while you're trying to get some training done at the legacy carrier? And if not, had you ever experienced any of that in the military?
So generally, I'm going to say no. It hasn't. I didn't notice it while going through training with Transglobal. Everybody was professional, and they were paying attention. There were a couple times where you would turn around in the simulator and you can see that the instructor's been texting somebody, but there was no loss of there was no interruption there was no interruption to the training. It was just the instructor, like Roger said, when you're sitting back there and you're seeing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Okay. Yeah. Cut them a little slack. Sending out a quick text message to the wife asking if the kid's, thrown up today. Okay. That's not a big deal. And then, on the flight deck as well, everybody's been really good. Like I haven't had any issues with folks breaking sterile. So military, it's been a little bit since I was in the instructional world in the military. So I can't really, I don't remember any specific occurrences. I did have a couple. So last summer of 22, I was doing some GA flight instructing, and a couple of my students were teenagers.
Oh,
and and I did have one or two that doing during ground instruction. You'd see them, they're doing this, looking at their phone, and I would stop, just stop for a minute and wait till they were done, and they'd hear me stop talking, and after a couple minutes they'd look up and go, "Are you done? You're paying for my time, So I'll sit here for as long as you want me to. But the value that you're going to get from me being on this side of the table, um, you get from it what you want to get from it. But I'm not going to sit here and talk while you text or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever the case may be. And the phone would go back in the pocket and pay attention. But I had a couple students like that. It usually only takes one time, and they stop doing it.
Right. And it reminds me of a story, and we do have a little bit of time today, so let's get into this one. A million years ago, a Czech airman over at Sandpiper was telling me a story. Tony, you're not going to believe this kid I had last week. Oh yeah, tell me about it. And he said, yeah, he shows up for his observation flying. This is where right before IOE, you go and you sit in the jump seat and you observe a captain and first officer flying an operation, usually an out and back.
Yep.
And then usually what happens over at Sandpiper is you observe the out and back, and then the FO gets to go home with pay, and you jump in the FO seat as a new hire, and you conduct your first leg of IOE. Congratulations. And this gives you kind of a leg up on what to expect. I'm getting the nod that this is no longer what happens at Sandpiper, but this is what happened to me. And I'm pretty sure Roger experienced a lot of this at his regional. Did you? No? Okay, well, this is what happened at Sandpiper. So
they just threw me in there. Here, you're going to go from point A to point B. Okay.
Well, at Legacy, that's what you do. You're required to do two or four ops. There used to be four when I was hired on at Legacy Airlines, but now I hear it's two. And so 2 domestic observations. So you do that in an effort to get an idea of what's expected of you outside of the simulator environment and more in the real world and the pace of everything and what to say on the radio, and you kind of get the idea. Well, this Czech airman was telling me how in the previous week, this kid shows up in the break room, in the crew room in Chicago, underneath the bowels of the terminal. And he goes, well, since you're here, let's talk about the Chicago 10-9 chart, the taxi diagram. And we can talk about what you're going to be observing. Instead of you just sitting there kind of in a blur hanging from the tail, let's talk about what to expect. And the guy goes, oh, okay, sure. Okay. He's a young kid in his 20s. And the captain was, going through, okay, we're at this gate and we're going to be talking, this is what we're going to do. And then right about 5 prior, we're going to tune in the radio. You're going to watch the FO. He's going to tune in the ramp frequency. He's going to go from operations frequency to ramp frequency. And then when they shut the door, we're going to hear this from the ground personnel. I'm going to give you a thumbs up. And then the FO is going to call ramp. They're going to ask for pushback. They're going to tell you this to a spot. And then after we start the engine, you're going to do your after start flow. And we're going to run a quick after start checklist flow. And then I'm going to say call ramp for taxi. And then they're going to tell you to the top and monitor the, what's it called? Not ground, metering. Monitor metering. Right. And so he's going through kind of step by step the process that he can expect to observe to give him as much of a leg up as possible, because he'll be expected to be able to do this in just 2 legs. And the kid pulls out his phone and he's texting his girlfriend like, no, I'm at work right now. Nah, my flight hasn't started yet. So the Czech airman just is in the crew room surrounded by probably a good couple dozen pilots and flight attendants and things like that. And he just stops and he looks at the kid, and the kid looks up from his phone and he goes, do you need to make a phone call or something? Or he's like, oh no, I'm sorry. He put it away. So he continues on with his instruction, and not 2 minutes goes by and he pulls out his phone again. Now he's texting his girlfriend's texting him, and he's texting back. And he stops and the kid looks up and he goes, you know what? F you. And he walks out of the crew room, and the kid's sitting there like, oh, and everybody in the crew room is like looking around like, holy crap, what did this kid do? And the FO is smiling from ear to ear, the FO that was flying with that Czech airman. And he goes, come on, get your stuff. Let's go. Plane's here. I'll show you how to do a walk around. So they go out there, they go do the walk around, and the kid's like, his eyes are all big. He's like, oh shit, did I fuck up? What did I do? Did I screw the pooch here? What's going on? So there's no room to sit or stand on the flight deck on an Embraer 145. So he's on the jet bridge, and now they're all done boarding, and he's sitting there with his kit bag and his, pen and his notebook, and he's sitting there, and he sticks his head in the flight deck, and he goes, Captain, are we good? Captain turns around with his coffee, and he's like, I don't know. Are you going to pull your fucking phone out again? And the new hire goes, no, you won't see it again. He goes, well, in that case, come on in, sit down. So he goes, he's telling me this story. And he goes, Tony, I think I got through to him. I think I got through to him because the rest of IOE, I did not see that damn phone. I'm like, well, that's great, man. That's great. He goes, until 3 weeks later, when I see him walking in the terminal with his jacket's not on, it's wintertime, his shirt's untucked, it's like all wrinkled, and his tie is like all loose and stuff, and he and like 2 other new hires are walking to get some coffee, and I walk right up to him and his new hire friends, and I look at his friends, and I go, you guys should be ashamed of yourselves letting your friend walk around looking like a piece of shit. I should write all 3 of you up. He's like, I thought I got through to you, but clearly I didn't. So this was clearly almost 20 years ago. It was like 15 years ago this happened more. And so it's always been a problem, but now it's just become something that is just ingrained. It's an addiction that's become ingrained, and it's a problem in the industry, and the FAA knows it. And the FAA will not go easy on anyone that is taken advantage by being distracted for whatever reason. But it goes both ways. It's not just the pilot or the FO or the new hire. It's also the instructor or the sim check airman. It's so ingrained. We have to break away from this. It's become a problem. And I got to admit, I am guilty as well. I really am. And I do my best to not put myself in that situation because I do want to set a good example. And how do you react? As a student pilot, have you ever sat there, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, and watched your instructor on their phone instead of giving you instruction? You are the client. You are paying them to provide instruction to you. You're in charge. You're in command. If it's unacceptable to you, speak up. Alex.
Yes.
You have anything to say about that?
I obviously I'm the most recent one out of all of us to leave the instructing world. And I was never that way. Like, you had me for 2 hours. My attention was yours for 2 hours. Also, I enjoyed instructing, enjoyed teaching and talking. So I was never on my phone in front of my students. Now, after a student or before my student got there, or while they were pre-flighting an airplane or post-flighting an airplane, yeah, I'll be on my phone because, that's when I have my free time to go do that. But never in front of a student. That was just my general rule of thumb, because it's aviation and there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to know and a lot to do in a short amount of time that we're together. So I was never that way. On the flight deck, I'm guilty of it. We all are. Are there others that I've seen that are worse? Yeah. I've seen guys browse dating apps the moment we land on the ground. So,
I'm a pilot.
we were on the ground and he was already swiping, and I just looked over, and I already had issues with him to begin with, and I just went, that just adds to it. Like, just stop. But there's guys that get up and they're on their phone and they're reading stuff, doing stuff on their phone, and then you get those old timers who still have a flip phone that's on a holster on their belt that they flip it open and turn it off before they go to fly. So you get the whole, like, everything in between there. I feel like I'm in that a little bit older generation where I'm not so needed to be on my phone, but we all still do it. It is a problem, but
yeah. And we don't need to get preachy out here, ladies and gentlemen. I know those of you that are like, well, I don't see a problem with it. I get it. I'm not trying to sit here and preach that we're better than you because, we see the problem. We recognize it. We recognize the issues and we try to mitigate, it before it becomes a problem. So just what we're trying to do is raise awareness that it's an issue. It's an issue with students trying to get some decent instruction. It's an issue with people out on the flight line trying to operate an aircraft. And the issue really is not whether or not you're on a device. The issue is something happens completely out of your control, completely not your fault, and then they do a little investigation with the NTSB and they find that trust me, they will go through everything. If you have your laptop in your overnight bag, they're going through your laptop. If your phone is in a backpack stored away, they're going through it. It doesn't matter. You signed your life away when you decided to get an air transport pilot certificate. If anything were to happen, they have every right to go through ATM statements, bank statements. When's the last time you had a drink? When's the last time what were you surfing the night before? Were you on Pornhub or were you getting the required rest? They're going to know if anything bad were to happen to you just by happenstance. And that sounds kind of over cautious maybe, but it's reality.
No.
It really is what happens. And you don't want to do shrooms and then jump an airplane. Did you see that the gentleman that the murder counts, they're trying to get those dropped because he did not, in fact, try to attempt 81 counts of murder. He just so I haven't really followed up too much on that, but I did see that in the feed. But I digress.
Don't get me started on that guy.
Yeah. Let's put those shrooms down. Alex,
Yeah.
put them down. Speaking of Alex, 750 hours is right on the horizon. What does that mean? Why is 750 hours so significant over at Sandpiper?
So at Sandpiper, one of the big things that the union fought for, this was before I started there, was the quality of life improvements. Obviously the huge pay jumps and holiday pays and everything that we'd get now. One of those quality of life improvements was once you earn 750 hours of qualifying time at Sandpiper, you put in a request and you immediately jump to captain's pay.
Nice.
So for me, that is literally a 50% pay increase from where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, realistically, that's a $4,500 more a month that I'll be pulling in while not being a captain. I will earn the pay until I become a captain at 950 hours.
So it's a company's self-induced, what's the word I'm looking for? It's their self-induced motivation.
Yes.
To get the pilots upgraded and moving in a forward direction in their journey in their career. And it's basically a financial punishment to the company's self to get you upgraded as soon as possible. And it's an incentive for you to stay with the company, because a lot of what was happening, and I think the reason this 750 pay bump came into effect is people were at an airline for about a year and then they go, hey, well, that airline's offering a big signing bonus with no contract. I'm going to go there now. And then they just would hop from one ship to the next ship to the next ship in order to get these bonuses and pad their income. And the company says, enough, we want people to stay here and have loyalty. So they're offered, oh, well, if you stay long enough, you're going to get captain pay, whether you're a captain or not.
Well, not just that, they wanted, people to stay for the flow to go to legacy on top of all that, right?
Like, so you get a bonus to leave the company, is what you're telling me.
No. They want you to stay. So obviously they're trying to get all this stuff. They want loyalty. What you're saying is they want all this. So like they want you to stay and not leave and jump ship. So this is every which way that they can to get loyalty out of pilots.
And if you flow through to mainline from Sandpiper to Legacy, you get another bonus.
There's a bonus on top of it. Yeah. So I signed the contract for it because I mean it's a good deal. And if I don't do the bonus structure, if if I leave and I'm not paid the bonuses that I've already been owed, like the ones that I'm supposed to get down the line, then I don't have to pay them back. I just have to pay what I've already gotten back. But they for Sandpiper and Legacy, you get a bonus at upgrade. So you get a $30,000 bonus at upgrade. You get a $40,000 bonus completing year one with qualifying hours. You get another $40,000 at year two with qualifying hours. And then you get, it's either a 50 or 60,000 once you flow to mainline.
Nice. Must be
So
nice. Yeah.
it's it all it is it's building loyalties, because like right now, as it sits, I've got 734 hours. I could go where Terry works at Transglobal. I could go to Acme. I could go to national carrier, the one national carrier that's based here in Dallas. I could go to the gangster airlines where there always seems to be a fight, and they would hire me right now. Like I could get a CJO, right? But I don't want to do that. My quality of life's too amazing. So I'm going to be one of those ones that's probably going to stay through the flow, because the quality of life and living in base and being high on the seniority list, as it stands right now, I'm top 40% of the company, not base, company, and I've only been there 2 years.
Nice.
Because people were leaving left and right. So why am I going to give that up to go sit junior and commute and do all that stuff to another place? Right now it's too easy.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this. It is a great time to be in aviation. If you're just listening and you're not a pilot and you're thinking, I've always wanted to be a pilot and I'm listening because I like to hear you guys talk about aviation. Well, thank you, number one. Number two, I hope this and all the other shows where we've talked about this just proves the point that the aviation industry is cyclical, and right now we're on one of the longest lasting upward trends in aviation history. And there really is not much holding this to be shortened, with the exception of one thing. And that's the age 67 ruling that we've been getting letters over at Legacy. And I don't know if Transglobal or Sandpiper their unions have been sending out any kind of information on this, but we've really been hammering down on the fact that they're opposed to the age 67 ruling. It is a safety to flight issue, that nobody wants to work past 65. Why are you making us work past 65? It is a Band-Aid at best. These are all terms we've used here on the show. We're kicking the can down the road for just 2 years. But then how do you deal with the international qualifications that will no longer sit in place? And, the union's been sending out emails, and it's even hitting the travel news circuit. From Travel Weekly, Robert Silk wrote an article on December 11th. I'll put a link in the show notes. And it's entitled, "The Case for Letting Older Airline Pilots Keep Flying." Now, it depends on who you ask if they want to keep flying to 67. Usually when people have 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 ex-wives, yeah, they want to fly till they're buried because they got to keep paying alimony or whatever. But most of us, realistically, do not want to fly past 65. We think, well, I've been doing this long enough. When am I going to enjoy life, right? Well, in an effort, he writes, underway to raise the mandatory retirement age for U.S. airline pilots from 65 to 67, faces plenty of opposition. Although controversial, such a change would not only provide a bit of quick relief to the U.S. pilot shortage, but also has the potential to increase safety. Interesting. Increase safety. The House's version of the FAA reauthorization bill, which passed last summer, includes language to up the pilot retirement age by 2 years. The Senate has yet to pass a companion bill amid a dispute over flight training requirements, though Republican Senator John Toon of South Dakota, who is a key member of the Chamber's Transportation Committee, recently told Reuters that a deal could be in the offing. Whether the Senate version will include a retirement age increase remains to be seen. Backers of the proposal have pushed it as an immediate, if relatively small antidote to the commercial airline pilot shortage, which this year stands at approximately 14,000 for North American carriers, according to a recent analysis by the consulting firm Oliver Wyman. That's 14,000 pilots short to conduct normal operations in the U.S. But the idea has powerful opponents, among them the Biden administration, which has noted that allowing pilots to fly up to age 67 is not in keeping with international norms. Airline pilot unions also oppose such a change, citing safety as well as the possibility that prohibitions against pilots flying over 65 in many other countries would prevent such U.S. pilots from crewing international routes. But while it is certainly true that pilots of advancing age need to have their cognitive and vital health appraised consistently, I found an argument that was made to me by a recently retired pilot to be very compelling. Dev Collin flew 30 years for United, retiring from his position as a Boeing 787 captain in August when he turned 65. He's now on the leadership committee of a lobbying organization called Let Experienced Pilots Fly. This past year brought a lot of attention to close calls in terms of aviation safety in the U.S., particularly on runways and during takeoff and landing. Serious incidents that the FAA acknowledges has risen. Collin contends that one reason for the increase in relative inexperience of U.S. airline pilots now compared to before the pandemic. According to the pilot recruitment advisory firm Future and Active Pilot Advisors, large U.S. airlines have hired more than 24,000 pilots since the beginning of 2022, a massive increase in the hiring pace compared with 2019, when less than 5,000 pilots were hired. Airlines have undertaken these ramp-ups in part to replace the approximately 5,000 pilots who accepted early retirement packages in 2020. They're also replacing a steady stream of pilots as they reach 65, as well as building padding into their pilot workforces to deal with overall reduction in efficiency in the U.S. airspace system and also another aftermath of the COVID crisis. All these developments have led to a more junior pilot corps than the industry had in 2019. I would say experience matters tremendously in my profession, says Collin. It is critical both with the actual operation and with the people who are instructing and teaching. I haven't seen data to back this hypothesis, but intuitively it does make sense. Airline pilots over the age of 40 are required by the FAA to undergo health screenings twice annually instead of once, including annual EKGs. That's crucial to safety. Allowing healthy pilots to stay in the cockpit a couple years longer would reduce the industry's newfound collective inexperience while also providing at least a bit of relief in the pilot shortage. So here's an article that's actually raising some interesting perspective that it actually would be good to let healthy pilots go to 67. But how do you do that? How do you tell an international wide-body captain, well, you can work 2 more years, but we got a 737 for you to fly daily, nonstop to Las Vegas 5 times a day? I mean,
I don't even think that argument is necessarily valid. I mean, so we had an American Airlines 777 cross those runways up in the Northeast. Where was that, JFK?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it JFK or LaGuardia?
Yep. JFK.
How long had that 777 captain been there? I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that when you get hired an American, you can upgrade to the 777 within a few years, right?
Yeah.
And so it's probably a very low time guy, new. It just doesn't, I don't think that necessarily holds water. And that's a prime example of it. And then you've got the United 777. I don't know what's going on with the 777s this last year. 777 in Hawaii that had that debacle.
Aren't they older, more experienced, more senior pilots to fly those, captains?
Oh, I'm like I said, like at American, I think at United, you can get in and you fly a 777 in the left seat after a couple of years too. I'm sure Terry, I'm not sure why Terry's still in the right seat, to be honest with you, in such a small plane.
Yeah, come on, Terry. Now, just pause for 1 second. I know Alex is giving me the signal. You gotta pull chocks. All right.
Yeah,
So,
my oldest is out early today, so I got to go get him from the baseball clubhouse.
okay. Well, Alex, let me just say thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your insight on our conversations. Hopefully, we've all taken some of what Alex said and make our own career journeys a little bit better from all your advice. So thank you.
Yes, because I'm so wise and have so much to give in my 2 years at the airlines.
Well, hey, you're the most recent, newbie. We've all been newbies here before, but you're the most recent one, and we do thank you for your input.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and that's part of the reason why I love this show is just everybody's collective experience.
Yep, and have a happy holiday, and we look forward to having you join us again on our next show, which will be season 6 in 2024.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Alex.
Merry Christmas, guys. I'll see you guys
Merry
later.
Christmas.
Have a good one,
See ya.
brother.
Bye.
Thanks. See ya. And then there were
So
three.
I say that facetiously, but I think that none of us, no matter what our age is, are immune to that. And I actually think that generally speaking, it's not something that's always going to show up in a physical exam. There's also the cognitively things slow down. I'm 40. Things are slower than they were 10 years ago. And I've got the theoretical 25 years left. And I don't say that as a or something that, a knock against. You can prevent. It's something that you can do, but I don't think that you can necessarily say that, hey, if we let these guys stay on for 2 more years, we're increasing safety. I don't necessarily think that's an argument. Now, if you want to make some other arguments about the pilot shortage, I'm sure that you could fight both sides of that. In the end, you're really just, no matter at its best, you're prolonging the inevitable.
Yeah. No, I don't agree
think
with
that
kicking
we're
the
any
can
safer.
either. Yeah. Well,
I don't think we're any safer by letting.
Well, most of the
for 2
time,
years.
people argue that you're not as safe because they say, well, hey, man, like you said, your cognitive ability and physical ability as well, declines. Is 2 years going to make a big difference for a healthy individual? Absolutely not. But
I would also argue that for a lot of these guys, especially these ones that we're talking about, the 777 or 787 captains that have been at their respective airlines, because it's all, again, probably going to be about the same for 30 years. What do they actually know? And that's not necessarily like a knock against them. They've had a great career, and I'm sure you can chalk it up to quote unquote experience, but those guys show up and what do? Okay, well, I showed up to my gate in LA, and are we going to Auckland or are we going to Sydney today? Are you guys ready to go?
In my day.
Go ahead. You guys can fire up that engine. I'll sit here and watch.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
the shot
I don't know.
caller.
Terry's down there. He's kind of smiling. He's probably got a little bit more experience with this. He's not quite in the uber big boys, but on the 7576, when you're going to transcom of those guys, been there. And I mean, and that's not to say that they're bad pilots. I'm just as a generalization, they've been there so long in that left seat, making huge amounts of money, which good for you guys. Is it experience?
Well, I saw this once in 1975. I saw an airplane that had this similar situation, and this is how they handle it. Let's do it that way, folks. I mean, yeah, there is some experience.
Absolutely.
Sure.
There's a lot of experience.
But there's also a lot of
other things going
flip
on.
phones and old timer steam gauge mentality there that may not be up with the current equipment that is on the aircraft or the current procedures. And we've all flown with these guys, right, and gals. It's like, well, this is the way I've always done it, so this is the way we'll always do it. And it's like, that's not the right mentality. That's not a safety conscious, threat and error management forward mentality. The mentality you want is someone that can adapt with the technology as it grows and the procedures as they get safer, and because everything's written in blood. It's all safety conscious. I mean, the CDTI, this is a new equipment by L3 that the legacy airplanes, the Airbuses, are getting on the flight deck. What is it? It's basically a way to identify the traffic in front of you so that now you're doing ATC's job. Have you identified United Flight 37? Yes, I have. Legacy has identified Flight 30. All right, follow United Flight 37 with a 3-mile separation, and you're cleared the visual approach. Well, we're IMC, but you'll get it. You're following them on the screen. So there are procedures that are in place, and these old timers go, I don't use that. Tell them unable. Why? Make them do their job. Okay. So as these different programs come into play at these carriers and daily operations that are supposed to help the efficiencies, help this overcrowded air traffic control system by having pilots maintain their own separation using equipment that is pretty darn accurate using TCAS to give you the separation. And there are those pilots that go, well, no, make them hire more people, So there's different mentalities here that come into play that are contradictory. So what is the right way to do it? Are you going to get that forward-thinking, modern attitude from a pilot who's thought he was going to retire at 65 and now he feels like he has to work 2 more years? Is he going to have the right attitude on the flight deck? Is he going to be forward-thinking and accepting to the new policies and procedures that may be coming into place at that time? All they wanted to do was sit at home and watch Netflix, who knows? And then how are you going to do with the pay? If they can't fly into international operations, what are they going to do? Are they going to pay them wide body pay to fly a 737 around and do 4 legs a day? They can't answer that. Congress can't answer that. So I don't think this is really something that's realistically going to pass anytime soon. Now, Terry, you're a wide body pilot. You fly with wide body captains all the time. Has this topic come up, and what are some of the things they're saying?
Age 67 is a hot button issue. So without taking a particular side, I mean, I have my opinions on it, and I think without taking a particular side, I would say one of the arguments against age 67 and for age 67 actually is that, what's the difference between a 65-year-old who turned 65 yesterday and a 64-year, 360-day guy who has 1 trip left? What's the difference? I mean,
nothing.
Really, it's a couple days in age. So what magically happens at age 65 that makes it not a good idea for that individual to fly anymore? Right. And nobody can answer that. So what a lot of people are screaming for is do a study. If we're saying that it's a health issue, that it's a cognitive issue, well, show me the data, right? Transglobal is very data oriented, as I'm sure all the airlines are, because at the end of the day, data turns into dollars, and whether that's saving dollars or spending dollars. But there's no data out there that supports one side or the other. So, I mean, let's do a study. The FAA, the federal government, I don't know, private organizations, somebody do a study, and figure out what is the actual health impact of turning age 65. What's the actual amount of cognitive decline? I mean, without getting political, we've got presidents who don't want to take cognitive tests, who are old and probably should have to. But I mean, cognitive decline is a real thing. When does it start? I don't know. Let's get some studies and figure it out.
I think that those studies are there. The problem is because it's all actuarial right now. But what happens on any individual base? Like when does mental acuity start to decline? Well, that's going to depend on the person. I mean, it's all going to start. Like I said, I already know that it's started happening for me. Can the layman notice it? No, probably not. because it's very small, and then it's, kind of just exponentially is going to increase. But from an actuarial standpoint, we know that you're more likely to die at age 65 than you were at age 58, and more likely to die at age 67 or lose your medical or what. That's just on a population-based actuarial standpoint. Now, the question then is, what are we willing to accept? That I can't venture a guess on.
Why is it okay for somebody to fly a 777 up until their 65th birthday, and not okay for them to go sit in that seat after turning 65, but then they can climb into the cockpit of what you fly and go fly it around the world? And
I do not have
issues?
an answer to that question, although that's, who has a bigger input on that though?
Insurance.
And my side is insurance. Because
Insurance.
the insurance knows those actuarial tables, and at some point they're just flat out don't insure you. And actually, is even, I want to say it's Executive Jet Management has a new policy. Don't quote me on that. I think it's them, that at age 70 they're no more. Because those stats, they do exist. There's the insurance aspect of it. There's the ICAO aspect of it. That you're not flying as many people around, I think, is really what it comes down to. But I personally don't have answers to those questions.
Well, who insures the airlines?
Who does insure the airlines?
Aren't they self-insured? Or do they have a rider
Bingo.
policy?
I believe they are self-insured.
Yeah.
And so now what you're looking at is, an organization that insures itself. I mean,
they can make the numbers whatever they want.
If they have the access to that same data, actuarial data, maybe they're the ones who are really.
They have the oversight of Congress, I guess, as well, which is maybe partially why they can do why the rules are maybe somewhat different.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a dog in this fight either. Like, I think, like you said, I don't really pick a side because I can see it from both sides. If they did it, I wouldn't be overly heartbroken. And if they didn't do it, I would not be overly heartbroken either. I just think that argument from a safety standpoint is, I think it's a hard sell to say that it's going to be safer to allow an age 66-year-old to fly. And actually, I have another question. I kind of was thinking about this that Terry, you can probably answer better. Who generally enters the flight plan
into the flight management
FMS
computer?
Yeah.
So the FO at Transglobal, the FO enters it. The captain is required to do an independent verification. And then on augmented trips, the IRO does as well.
Okay. But the FO is the one that enters the flight plan. And
generally speaking, if it's not, it's uplinked.
You guys just have a recall number that you can put
dispatch,
in there?
Yeah. So when we initialize the box, it uplinks, and really the only thing that we're doing is we'll make sure that it's correct. We'll enter in the departure, the actual SID and STAR, because those don't get uplinked.
Right.
And then we'll load wind data.
Right.
Yeah.
Who normally does the walk around?
The FO.
So if I have, I'm just spitballing here, and again, this sounds like I'm anti old guy 777 pilot, which I'm not. But if I've got a guy that's been there for 30 years, and we'll just say the 777, it's arbitrary, but a 777 guy who's been flying the 777 in the left seat for maybe 15 years, does he know how to enter a flight plan? When was the last time he did a walk around? Because I bet you that there are probably some that haven't entered a flight plan in a decade.
There very well
who
could
is
be.
Who is the more well-rounded pilot, generally speaking?
There very well could be captains out there who don't. I will tell you that in my fleet, most of the captains,
there's got to be the minority. They would.
Yeah, they're very much the minority. Because so on our augmented trips, we've got the additional FO, and he's the one who does the walk around. He's the one that, gets on the PA, seat in the flight attendants before we blast off. And then the flying FO really, gets in and just sets everything up.
Which is kind of my point. What does the captain do? And and again, not that this is a bad thing, but they're the overseer, right? Is really what I think that it probably comes down to. But in the end, when you've been doing that for a really long time, and thank goodness we have such the aircraft manufacturers, we have a very extremely safe aviation system so that things do not happen very often. But when you're overseeing something where everybody, if they do their job, nothing ever happens, is this safer to just let those guys just, oh, well, everybody does their thing and I'm the boss?
So for
sometimes
us,
that's what I see in the wide body fleet.
For us, the captains, so while the FO's up front getting things set up, the captains in the back usually briefing the flight attendants, because they've got a briefing they've got to go through. Coordinating with the gate agent for any issues, and coordinating with with dispatch if maybe the fuel's not right, maybe we need more gas, maybe we need a different alternate, I don't know. And then usually after they've done some of that coordination, they're back up in the cockpit and they're double checking the box. Sure. Right, they're checking everything,
verifying
they're setting
everything
up their side,
especially for those oceanic crossings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say at least I would say for the wide body fleet, the captains, there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that may not be completely evident to the outside
I think
observer,
it's more management and paperwork related than it is.
It is. It's there's definitely more of a management aspect there. But there, I mean, maybe this I don't know what the right word is. My words are failing me right now. But at the end of the day, the experience level of the captain, having done it hundreds, thousands of times. Having had those emergencies en route and manage those emergencies en route and manage diversions while you're on a North Atlantic track or things like that. That's what you're paying for. Now, the only flip phone guys that I've flown with are the guys who are right up there ready to retire. Like I flew on my last trip. I flew with a guy who's retiring in February because he's turning 65, and he was a flip phone guy. He had his way of doing things, but he also, he took a lot of the new stuff. He had a lot of the older ways as well. I think those guys are very quickly going away because they're reaching that age. At least from what I've seen, not.
That's just generalization because everybody's going to be different,
right?
Yeah.
Right. And if I could just interject there, because as one of the newest captains here at Squawk Ident, I was a captain before. I mean, all of you have been, but I think Terry, you kind of mentioned the experience is what you're paying for. You may not have experienced it as the PIC, but in terms of how long have you been in this industry, you probably have seen a lot as a first officer, maybe as a flight instructor, maybe as a student, maybe as a military pilot. So it's that experience, that time in the industry that really counts. And I think that's the argument that is being made from the article that I read earlier is you can't replace that. No book, no YouTube video, no instructional home study course will ever experience hands-on, actual real-life experience. And I think that's what really makes that decision-making, which is what the captain is there to do. If you have 3 qualified pilots, all 3 of the pilots in that flight deck on an augmented flight are qualified to fly the airplane by themselves. That's a fact. They've all been typewritten They're all checked out. They're all ATP certified. They're all qualified. When something happens, when the avenue at which to take for any particular non-normal procedure is in question because maybe it's not a policy or procedure that's outlined clearly, who makes the decision? Who's the final authority? It's the captain. And the captain doesn't necessarily need to even be correct or right, but as long as the decision is a safe one and I never thought I'd be a lawyer. Sidebar. Never thought I'd be a lawyer. Thought my knowledge of the English vocabulary is not that good. Really don't like arguing. I'd never become a lawyer. Then I became an airline pilot. And after just the first few years of being an actual 121 airline pilot, I realized that every contract, every reg, every operations manual, every procedure has been written by lawyers. And to understand them, you have to translate them from lawyer or legalese into layman's terms. And so you get better at that as time goes on. And you need to remember, whether you're a student pilot or a getting ready to retire captain, the actions I took at the time were the safest course of actions I could interpret with the data I had at the time. Doesn't mean I was right. Doesn't mean, but I'm the 4-striper, so the responsibility comes to me. My name and my signature, my initials are what go in the book to accept the aircraft. My initials are electronically placed on every single flight release. And if anything were to happen, I'm the one in front of all the crew members at the hearing because I've got that responsibility. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for he's a better pilot. She's a better pilot. You're not paying for they've flown longer, more years. The reason I'm a pilot that happens to have 4 stripes is because seniority is the only thing, to quote Mr. Daigle. So does 67 matter? I would argue in the grand scheme of things, no, because it is absolutely an individual's personal scenario. Both of you said it. Each individual, there are 40-year-olds that shouldn't be flying right now. And there are 75-year-olds that would make excellent pilots and leaders to this day. So where do you draw the line? Who has the data? The insurance companies have the data. That is, if they want to indulge that information. Because those surveys and those recording of that data, they take decades of information. We need to see what's happening, because maybe the 65-year-old from the last time the data was collected, which was 20 years ago, is a different 65-year-old from the year 2023. So great conversation, gentlemen. I absolutely thoroughly enjoy having these conversations and getting your input and listening to them. You've opened my eyes on maybe if I see a guy with a flip phone, I won't scoff anymore. Oh, do you like to wear your phone on your belt that way, sir? Do you ever scratched your phone leaning against stuff? No? Okay. So yeah, well, now it was a pleasure speaking with you gentlemen about this. I thought of like 4 other things to talk about, but I think we'll save it for the next one. Next season, it's coming up. I'm really looking forward to it. This year we produced 16 shows. It's a significantly less number of shows than we did in the years before. And I've promised myself, my co-host, and my audience that more shows to come in the following year. Format change slightly. The more than 2 hour shows. 2 hours is a beautiful mark for me personally, because once I start a conversation and we all start talking, I love to just let it go. But yes, we're definitely going to start looking at a smaller, shorter format so that more shows can come out. And we want to hear from you. All the listeners out there that have been so kind to send us feedback over this last year and the years prior, we can't tell you enough how much we appreciate that. All of your support really does help. And we're looking forward to season 6. What's to come? Well, You'll just have to stay tuned and find out. I just want to say thank you right now to Captain Roger, to Alex, to Terry for joining me today. And I want to thank all of you out there that have supported the show in 2023 and continue to support it in the future. We do hope that you'll share this podcast online with your friends and your family and anyone that you might think might be interested in aviation. Please be sure to subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident Podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. And we also want to know what you're listening on. Send us some feedback. Do you prefer Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or maybe one of the second generation podcast apps out there? We also love receiving your feedback, as we mentioned, so please send us an email or even an audio file. The best way to do that is to record something on the voice memo app on your Apple phone or on your Android phone, and then email it to us. That way you're not limited to the 90 seconds that is on the audio feedback link on our website, which is found at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. You'll find everything there, from the pilot shop, where you can buy mugs and t-shirts and hats, to photos from the flight line, the guest book photo tab, where you can see photos of some of our wonderful guests that we've had over the years. And you could also leave a small donation to the show. Every financial bit helps to going to pay for this podcast, to get the website up, to pay for the editing software, to pay for the subscriptions. All of it goes to that. And a little bit goes to what we call the beer fund. So thank you. We also want to hear from you from some of the social media websites that we're on. You can follow us. Just follow Squawk Ident on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, would you? Be safe and take care of each other. Happy holidays, everyone. See ya.
Yeah.
fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.